Journaling is great, in theory. But let's be real, most of us do not have talent for it. So let's do something easier. Logging. By the end of this video, you will have a quick and effective system for logging and reviewing your log entries in Obsidian. This means no more blank page anxiety, faster note-taking, and an easy way to review past thoughts. And if you still want a full-blown journal, your log entries will help you with that too. And if you have nothing else to log, you can always keep track of your learning progress on Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video. Brilliant makes it easy to learn anywhere, right on your phone, with fun lessons you can do whenever you have time. I use Brilliant because here I can learn by doing instead of just memorizing. They offer thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. Learning just a little bit every day is one of the most important things you can do, both for personal and professional growth. Whether you're diving into a new topic or doing a quick practice session, you can level up on the go in just minutes. Their comprehensive range of math courses are built for learners of any level, whether you want to brush up on fundamentals or challenge yourself with more advanced concepts. Here, I can build and use formulas to solve real problems in business and everyday life. And it helps me with visual and spatial problem-solving skills too. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/leanproductivity or scan the QR code on the screen. Or you can also click on the link in the description. Doing that, you will also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Be honest, how many times have you said, I should or would like to start journaling? Then you sit down, open your journal, grab your pen and nothing. Now, I know there are many accomplished journal writers out there, and if you're among those, congratulations and I envy you. For the rest of us, let's see what we can do to make it easier for us. Traditional journaling fails because there is too much pressure to write something deep or meaningful for many of us. It also takes too long. Life is moving very fast and we don't always have the time to write essays. Then, there's potentially no structure. It's really difficult to stay consistent when there is no clear format for your journal. And reviewing all the entries can be frustrating. Who wants to dig through pages and pages of rambling thoughts? That's why I recommend a different approach. Logging instead of journaling. There must be a reason why it's called Captain's Log and not Captain's Journal. A log entry is quick, structured, and easy to maintain. Instead of writing full-length pages, you capture key moments in bullet points or in short notes. And this comes with several benefits. There's really no pressure. There's no need for long or perfect sentences. It's also more consistent because it only takes seconds instead of minutes or hours to write something. And they're easy to review. We can scan past entries at a glance, and if we add tags to our entries in Obsidian, then we can use Dataview queries to gain insights and also learn from the past. Additionally, we can capture ideas instantly, and our log also grows with us. We can always expand any log entry if we want to create long-form journal entries afterwards. Just think of it like a captain's log. It's short, functional, and to the point, but remains flexible. Let's set this up in Obsidian so that logging becomes effortless. As always, there are multiple ways to achieve similar results in Obsidian. I will demonstrate the one that works for me. This means I am using a hotkey to trigger a log entry which will then be added to my daily note. Alternatively, if we don't work with daily notes, we could add the entries to a dedicated log node, whatever works best for each of us. Before we look at plugins, let's prepare the folder structure and templates that we will need later on. Again, if you're not working with daily notes at all and keep your log entries in one dedicated node, you will not need this somewhat elaborate folder structure. My preferred folder structure for daily notes is to have one folder in my root directory. I called it 06bj, and BJ stands for bullet journal, just to be clear. And yes, I know it's not really a bullet journal yet, but it might become one eventually. Under that, I have the folders for daily, weekly, and monthly notes. As you can see, I use number prefixes for my folder names to control the sort order properly. Now, I don't want thousands of daily notes in a single folder. This would potentially have a negative impact on the Dataview queries we are going to create later on. So I also have one folder per year under daily, weekly and monthly. And under the year in daily, I also add a level with one folder per month. I also like to keep everything that is not actual content in a separate folder. I call it 90 Organize. This also includes a templates folder. While it's not strictly necessary, I keep all my templates related to the bullet journal in a subfolder called BJ. Here we can find 3 templates. Let's start with the one for daily notes. This is how mine looks like in source mode. We have some front matter fields, including the node class. That's only relevant because I also use the metadata menu plugin. If you don't need that. After that, I use some templater code to automatically fill the week and my month properties based on the file title. Then I have several properties for tracking my habits. Again, you can skip or modify those for your own purposes. And the last property here is just for tags, setting the value bj/daily automatically. At the top of the node content, I have a little code block related to the journals plugin. This will automatically create navigation items for going to the previous and next day, and also add links to the current week and month of a daily note. I know that many people don't like it, but I prefer to have the note title as a heading 1 in my daily notes. For this, I also add some templater code to the template. If you don't want or need this, just skip it. The template will still work just fine. I try to keep my daily notes informative and simple. For the informative aspect, I added a section called At a Glance. This contains various queries. As you can see, I chose not to put the queries directly into the template, but have them in a separate node, which I just embed here. This means that if I need to change the query, I just modify it in a single place and will have the updated version in all my daily nodes, rather than having to update each node individually. I find this approach to be a real time saver and use it quite often. We will see the result and details about it a little bit later. The next section is for logging and aptly called log. After that, I just have some space for today's thoughts with a node, inline property and tomorrow's focus. Next, we have the weekly template. This has only a tags property with the value bj/weekly in its front matter. After the front matter section, we can again find the navigation block from the journals plugin. The heading 1 is again created by some templater code and returns the start and end date of the respective week. Then I just embed another node with a query that returns all the nodes created in that week. And at the end, I have a simple Dataview query returning values from the various tracking properties we saw on the daily node template already. You won't be surprised to see that the monthly template follows a similar approach. A tags property with the value bj/monthly, the navigation block from the journals plugin, and a heading 1 created with some templater code. In the content area, I have a section called highlights with a query that returns all the daily nodes of that month, where I added a value to the previously shown inline property node. And as for the weekly node, I have an overview of my habit tracking. But of course, for the whole month rather than just a week. Okay, let's talk plugins. For the basic functionality, we need only 3 plugins. But if we want things to be a bit more flexible, convenient, and easier to maintain, I suggest using a few more. As you will see, some of these plugins are very popular and odds are that you are already using them anyway. Here are the ones that we really need. The Hotkey Core plugin, the Templates Core plugin, and the Quick Add Community plugin. Theoretically, that are all the requirements for creating structured log entries. However, I know that many people work with daily notes, so do I, and I also want to analyze and review my log entries. So here are some recommended logins which I'm also using for this tutorial. Dataview for querying and analyzing my log entries. Dynamic Embed for embedding elements such as queries in nodes, making it easier to maintain and update them. Journals for daily, weekly and monthly notes. This replaces the Daily Notes Core plugin and the Periodic Notes Community plugin, which I have been using until now. Templater replacing the Templates Core plugin. To install those plugins, we go to Settings, Community Plugins, go on Browse, and search for the plugin name. Once found, we click on Install and Enable. I show this only for one plugin here, but the process is the same for all of them, of course. Once the plugins are installed, we need to configure them properly. Please note that any folder names and paths I use here need to be replaced with your own values, unless you are working on my free Lean Starter Vault, where all these things are already included and functional. If you have not seen that vault, you will find the link in the description. Now, let's go through them, starting with the Dataview plugin. This is pretty straightforward. We just need to make sure that the first 5 options are enabled. These will let us use inline queries, JavaScript queries, and inline JavaScript queries. The last 2 options enable inline field highlighting in reading and live preview mode. The next plugin is Dynamic Embed. However, this one just needs to be enabled. There are no configuration options at all. Which brings us to the Journals plugin. We start by defining the first day of the week. In my case, that's Monday, but you can pick any other day, of course. Similarly, I want the first week of the year to be the one that has January 1st in it. Then we need to add a journal. The plugin supports multiple journals in parallel, but for our purposes, one is enough. So I click the plus button and enter journal as the name and ID respectively. After clicking on Add, additional options appear. The root folder is the previously created folder 06BJ. This is important because the plugin will create any nodes or folders relative to this one. Personally, I don't want the daily node to open on startup, so I leave this deactivated. As you have seen, we prepared templates for daily, weekly, and monthly nodes. So I enable these 3 here in the options. If you want to work with quarterly and yearly nodes, you have to enable them too, of course. We click into the settings for daily nodes and choose how the plugin should open the node. Personally, I like to open them in a new tab. We can leave the variable for the node name template set to date and change the default date format from year, month, day to this string. Remember how I mentioned that we don't want thousands of daily nodes in a single folder? Well, with this string, we tell the plugin to always use or create a folder for the year and month and then put the daily node into that specific folder. Speaking of folders, we want the plugin to create a node in our 10 daily folder. Next, we tell the plugin to use our previously created template for daily nodes. We can simply search for it and pick it from the list. I keep the last 2 options disabled because I don't need to see a link to creating daily nodes in the ribbon. I prefer doing it via the calendar. And I don't need the node to be created at startup automatically. We can move on to weekly nodes. The principle is the same, but of course, we need to use the correct default date format. In this case, we want it to look like this. Year for the folder, and then slash 4 digits for the year, plus the week ISO number. This will create a node in the correct folder and give it the proper week number. All the weekly nodes shall be created under 11 weekly. No big surprise there. And they shall use the weekly nodes template. And we do the same for the monthly nodes. Here we set the proper default date format. The folder is 12 monthly and the template is the one for monthly nodes. Moving on to quick add. As I am doing this tutorial using my Lean Starter Vault, there are already many quick add actions defined. We can safely ignore those. If you want to know more about them, then take a look at the related tutorial, the link to which I left in the description for you. What we want to do is to enter a name, for example, log entry, select the capture option and click on Add Choice. This will create a new line. We click on the flash icon to enable it as a command that can be found in the command palette and used with hotkeys. Then we click on the gear icon and configure this action. First, we define the file name with this string. As you can see, it's not just a name, but also includes the folder in which the file can be found. We are using the date variable here and format it to make sure that the path and name are exactly as we want them to be. Fortunately, there is a preview which lets us check the results right away. Then we activate the option to create the file if it doesn't exist, and also to create file with given template. Fairness dictates that we specify this template and, once again, we point to our daily nodes template from earlier. The next relevant option is to enable insert after. Here we insert the title of the log section. Remember, this is a level 2 heading, so we enter ## log. And the last thing to do here is to enable capture format and enter the string for the bullet point, the time variable, a colon, and then the value variable. Don't forget to add an empty line or the entries will all be on the same line in our node, which we obviously don't want. As we can see in the preview, this will add a list item with a timestamp. The value variable will ask for an input whenever we trigger the action and then add our input after the timestamp and colon to our node. Now we can click out of the quick add settings and move over to the hotkeys. Here we search for log, click on the plus icon and press the hotkey of our choice. In my case, that's Alt and L. Last but not least, let's take a look at the templater settings. The most important thing here is to tell templater where to find our templates. In my case, this is the folder 90organize/templates. I also like to activate syntax highlighting on desktop as it makes reading templater code much easier. The rest of the settings is entirely up to you. And that's it for our plugins. Now, let's see it in action. Okay, we have our folders, templates and plugins all set up and configured. Let's see if things work as we want them to. Let's first create today's daily note. We can simply click on today's date in the calendar element and the journals plugin will use the specified template to create a note in the right folder with the right name. Now we can also see how the previously mentioned calendar nav element looks like. With this, we can easily navigate to the previous and next day and click directly on the week number, taking us to the weekly note. The same is true if we click on the month, of course. I used to create this kind of navigation myself with the help of some templater code, but honestly, this is much easier and, if I'm completely honest, prettier too. Coming back to our daily note. We also see the At a Glance section. This shows me overdue tasks due today, any notes created on this day, and a list of notes created on the same date, but in previous years. If I briefly switch to source mode, you can see that this is actually an embedded element instead of 4 native queries. I will talk about embedded elements a bit later in detail. For now, let's focus on the log section, which is of course empty for the moment. We just press Alt and L, the hotkey we defined earlier, and Obsidian asks for our entry. We call it first entry because we are very creative. Hit enter and there you go. We immediately get our bullet point, timestamp and text in the log section of today's note. Note that this works not only with plain text. We can also use emojis like this rocket with the text, "This works." And we can even use one of Obsidian's best features, links to other notes like the read me first note in this vault. And another cool thing is that we can use tags just as we would when writing directly in our note. Here is an entry to indicate a win. We can then use these tags in our Dataview queries, of course, but we will also get into that one a little bit later. So far, we created all these entries while the daily note was open, but that's actually not necessary. We can be on any other note or close them all. We can still use the hotkey, enter our text, and when we open the daily note, the entry is right where it should be. And that's it for the mechanics. Now we know how to set it up and create various log entries. But we all know that taking notes or log entries is just the beginning. The real value comes when we review them and learn from them. Of course, we could just sit down once in a while and click through our daily notes. But let's be honest, who does that, really? Alternatively, we can use Dataview queries to help us gain insights. And this is what we're going to do next. Now that we have set up our daily log mechanism and established a healthy habit of fast logging, let's take it to the next level. To do so, we use Dataview, which lets us find logs with a specific tag, for example win or challenge, generate a list of all our best ideas, reflections or lessons learned, track patterns over time like mood, habits or recurring obstacles. Personally, I track my habits via the front matter of my daily notes. But some things do not occur every single day. Here are some example tags that I'm using. Win, like I finished reading Atomic Habits. Lesson, like I realized that I work best in 90-minute deep work blocks. I could also track my mood with this hashtag, if not tracked in the front matters already. Or thought, what if I step out of my comfort zone and start doing X? Or also very easy to track an idea or my ideas in general, like to write some good night stories for my kids as main characters. Here is a Dataview JS query included in the free Lean Starter Vault. If you don't want to download the vault, you can also copy it directly from my wiki, the link to which is in the description for you. Now let's go through it. This query creates a table with the columns date and win. It goes through all the notes in the folder 06bj/10daily/2025 searching only for markdown files. Then it looks for the tag #win and the text following this tag. It then extracts this text and finally builds the table with a link to the node in the first column and the win description in the second one. This gives me a very nice overview of all the good things that happened to me. And here is the same query adapted to return nodes with the tag lesson. Remember, we never lose, we either win or we learn. So lesson seems appropriate. And also the text after the tag. And yes, if we have multiple entries with the same tag, this also works. Obviously, we can use this to query any tag we want. Our imagination is really the only limit here. I'm sure you can see how valuable it can be to add such queries to your monthly, quarterly or yearly notes. Once you start using this, you will never lose track of important insights again. Just try to make it a habit to run a weekly or monthly review using these queries. Look for patterns. What types of wins come up the most? What lessons repeat? Use the insights to adjust your routine and make smarter decisions. Throughout this tutorial, I mentioned embeddable elements several times and promised to explain those a little bit later. Well, now it is a little bit later, so what's the deal with these elements and why do I like using them? Let's say we have a template based on which we create new nodes. In this template, we have a native query. Obviously, this query will be copied over to any node that we create based on that template. But if we need to adapt the query in our template, then the existing nodes will remain unaffected. Now, sometimes this can be desired, but often I want these query changes to also affect existing nodes. Normally, I would go to the nodes and fix the query manually, or, if possible, use search and replace across files to do it. Now, that's bad enough with a single query, but imagine having multiple ones in a template and tens or hundreds of nodes created with this template, as it's likely to be with daily nodes. The overhead for maintaining them grows very quickly. Now, let's remove those queries from the nodes and templates and instead create elements. Technically, these elements are just nodes. They contain nothing but the query that we want to use. If we then embed such an element in our template and create new nodes, the element will also be embedded in these nodes. This means the query still only exists in the element and not independently in each node. If we then modify the query in our element, these changes will automatically be applied to all the nodes using this element. Let me show you a practical example. This is the Daily at a Glance section in my Daily Notes template. As you can see, when I switch to source mode, it consists of 4 callouts, each of which has one embedded element. I'm also using the multi-column CSS for arranging them, but that's just a personal preference, not a technical requirement. If we open the first element called Tasks Overdue by Due Date, we can see that it's just a node with a query. The same is true for the Nodes Created This Day element. Again, just a query in a single node. If I open the daily node next to the element node, we can see how this looks like. And if I change the query for Nodes Created This Day to also include nodes from the folder 06bj, which normally is excluded, then we will see that the daily node updates accordingly. As you can imagine, this makes it much easier to maintain and optimize our nodes. Just imagine the Obsidian team releases an alternative to Dataview as part of the Obsidian Core functionality at some point. With embedded elements, I just need to update the elements and not the hundreds of nodes using them. And since I'm lazy by nature, saving work is always very appealing to me. So, are you ready to stop struggling with journaling and start logging instead? Or use logging as an easy entry point for your journaling? Set up this system in Obsidian and let me know in the comments if it helps you stay consistent. And perhaps you could also share your own ideas for the rest of us. We will be happy to see them. I will be watching the comments like a hawk for sure. And if you want more simple but powerful ways to use Obsidian, make sure to check this video next. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.